Welcome to the Inside Housing Podcast, where we break down the housing process, real estate, and investing. Here we go. Kyle, welcome to Inside Housing Podcast. I'm glad you could make it, man.
Thanks for having me.
Taking the time.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So the first thing I like to do is just have you introduce yourself, the correct pronunciation of your last name.
Absolutely. So Kyle Tetzlaff, I am the Chief Executive Officer / new staff member for the Vermont Association of Realtors and a new Vermonter.
So when did you move here? You moved here for the job, right?
Yeah, I moved here for the position, so I moved up here the end of October 2025.
And you're coming from Kentucky, correct?
Yep, Lexington, Kentucky, and then Florida before that.
Okay, so tell me, what made you want this position?
I have to say, we have an incredible leadership team here in Vermont throughout the entire interview process. I was just smiling ear to ear at the opportunity to lead this organization, to serve alongside some people who are really passionate about the association and our membership. I was in a leadership position in Kentucky. I was a COO there for about 3 years. And I felt like this was just the natural next step for my career and to give back to this industry that's just been so giving to me. And I'm just fortunate to be a part of it.
What was your role in Kentucky exactly?
So I was the chief operating officer, which means you just do a lot of everything, in my opinion. It's still a leadership position, but the day-to-day is quite substantially different than it is here in Vermont. But yeah, and then before that, I was the government affairs director and the director of operations for a local association in Central Florida.
And I know when they were looking for a new CEO, because the individual that you replaced was a long-standing CEO and well-known, they were looking far and wide and trying to find the best candidate. And there was a lot of excitement when you joined the Vermont Association of Realtors. So how has it been transitioning into the role? How have you viewed it?
I appreciate you saying that. And Kathy Sweet, my predecessor, is an incredible person. I'm so happy that she's enjoying her retirement. She worked for the local association and the state association as well for decades. And it's really tough stepping into somebody's shoes that you respect. But thankfully, she left the association in a much better place than she found it and gave us a really good framework just to build from. It's been a great 7 or 8 months. I think the members have been very welcoming. I've been really adamant about telling staff and membership that we're not going to change, we're going to grow, because nobody likes change. But I think everybody wants to be better and to grow. So it's been a great 7 or 8 months so far.
What was the biggest difference coming from Kentucky up to Vermont? Because you also, that's an interesting transition, is that not only a new role and a new position, but also an entirely different state.
Yeah, so it's been, aside from geography, I think scale has just been the biggest shift for me. So in Kentucky, we had 13,000 members, just about 6 times what we have here in Vermont. I think in terms of the scale, I try not to let that be an excuse to think small. I still want to think big. I still want to have big picture items for our membership. The Leadership Academy is a great example of that. We have a really great state leadership academy that I'm proud of and an incredible inaugural class that I'll put up against anybody else's. But yeah, the geography is quite different here, and the culture, the economy, the environment, everything is quite a bit different than it was in Kentucky. But we have a lot of really passionate people in real estate here.
It's something I've learned about Vermont over the years because I've been in and out myself. Vermont's small, and there's advantages and disadvantages to that. And one of the advantages, in my opinion, is you just get to know people really well. And the disadvantage is that anything you do, like one little change, has potentially more impact because it's, what is the way they phrase it? They go per capita. But like that could, like for Vermont, that could be, 3 or 4 people.
Yeah.
So, all right, you're transitioning, you're coming to Vermont, and as you looked at the landscape, what were some of the things in the beginning that you were saying, okay, this is where I want to grow or do? Or was it more evaluating what this would be? Because, myself, when I stepped into a leadership position, I spent the first year just trying to figure it out, what it was, before I was like, okay, I want to do this, want to do that. So how have you kind of looked at it?
I think it's a little bit of both. And I was fortunate to come into a state where we haven't had a strategic plan in about 3 or 4 years. So I was able to really get my hands dirty and figure that out and work with our staff and leadership to see where we want the organization to grow towards. And honestly, SentryLock and the eKey transition was one of the biggest priorities coming into the position. 2 weeks on the job, we had our annual meeting down in Southern Vermont. And then the next week, we're in Houston at the NAR NXT conference, meeting with the different electronic key and lockbox providers having to sort that out for our members. And getting that transition underway was one of the largest projects we were taking on outside of advocacy, communication, education, networking, all the other assets that our association provides our members.
I have to say you did a really good job with that. For anyone who doesn't know, getting access to homes, that's one of like the fears, right? Can I get inside of this home, and how do you secure it? And, the Bluetooth connection, all that. So I think, being able to have SentryLock and everyone in the state can use it if they choose, I thought was pretty good.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, we have a really small team here in Vermont. We have 4 staff members plus a part-time communications consultant. So having to do a lot of that heavy lifting was not easy. So I really appreciate you saying that. And I think for the most part, our members were really gracious and patient throughout the transition, because if Vermont didn't take that on as a state association, our members wouldn't have that access to homes that you're talking about. So thank you for saying that.
All right, so let's kind of go back, because a lot of people listening in, they're both inside the community, right? Realtors and, inspectors, all that, but they're also they're just consumers. So what, if you had to define the Association of Realtors in Vermont, what is their role? How would you explain that?
Yeah, so our mission statement is to empower our members to succeed and to be the voice for real estate and to protect private property rights. So those are a couple quick items there that tie back to our mission statement. I think for any trade organization, advocacy is the most important piece, and then your most important function as a group. Being able to do that on a statewide level is really important for our members, our consumers, and all of the ancillary businesses like our inspectors, our appraisers, our mortgage lenders, and everything like that. So being able to advocate for your industry with one voice, I think, is the most important aspect of any trade organization. But other than that, we provide a lot of tools to help our member get to the next transaction. So we offer Forewarn for our members' safety. We offer Dot Loop for contracts. We offer forms ourselves. We have a really strong adoption of statewide forms in Vermont that not all states have.
So hold on, unpack that a little bit, because not everybody understands that the forms that we're using in the state are uniform.
Yeah, so we have standardized forms here in Vermont, which is incredible. I think we've been offering those for a long time, and we have strong adoption, I would say, in the field. So this is something that in Kentucky we didn't really have. We offered statewide forms, but it's mainly the smaller organizations locally that used it. The Lexington and Louisville associations have their own forms, so members are having to learn how to use 3, 4, 5, 6 different forms just to complete a transaction.
So you're talking different versions of the purchase and sales agreement.
Different addendums, everything is
really
varies quite a bit throughout the state, I would say.
So that's a strength of Vermont.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So you came in and they're doing that, and then what is the consumer protection piece is something that not everybody knows, is that the association is really intent on providing protection to buyers and sellers. So what would some of those be?
I think a lot of it ties back to advocacy, I would say, for consumer protection. An example of consumer protection would be wholesaling. So there are organizations and entities that practice wholesaling properties without a real estate license. So that's something that we advocated against in Kentucky and got passed with unanimous support throughout the legislature, so that anyone who is wholesaling properties, because a lot of our members flip properties, anyone is entitled to do that, but it's specifically the predatory practice of targeting elderly people and people who aren't as educated about what the value they have in their home is, especially after COVID. You need to have a real estate license in order to wholesale property in Kentucky. So that's something that hopefully in the future we can advocate for in Vermont, to make sure that everyone who is practicing real estate is licensed. And it's not a huge issue here. Down south, it's much more prevalent. A lot of state associations were able to pass wholesaling legislation, but we need to be forward thinking and protect our, not just our members, but our consumers, like you were talking about.
And then as far as like advocacy goes, what are some of the bigger initiatives that you've been taking on this year with your team?
Yeah, so I got to give credit to Peter Tucker, who is our Director of Advocacy and Government Affairs. He does an incredible job. He is on the Hill every single day. And our Government Affairs Committee, they meet bi-weekly for about an hour and a half to 2 hours sometimes. So we have quite a number of legislative priorities, but a lot of it comes down to just protecting independent contractor status, advocating for educational reform throughout the state of Vermont, and anything that just ties back to real estate, lowering taxes, hopefully. It's quite a bit that goes into our advocacy efforts. And a lot of times it's not what you get through the finish line, it's what you keep out of bills.
Sort of the goaltending piece of it?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It's hard to communicate that sometimes because you don't want it to come back, you don't want to put it in writing, but protecting our members and keeping harmful legislation from crossing the finish line is incredibly important.
So, what would you say from kind of your stances? What were some of the bigger wins we had? Because we had the legislative session, it
Mhm.
ended, and there was a lot of turmoil. There's a lot of back and forth. I know, like, I think Act
181.
181, that was one where I think we had some wins. So, kind of just big picture, right? And I plan to
Mhm.
have Peter on at some point.
Yeah.
What would you say some of the things that you felt good about this year?
Yeah, and Peter would be the best spokesperson for that. But the Act 250 reform, I think a lot of organizations that are affiliated with real estate would say that was a big win this session. The repeal of the road rule and just amending that and getting the ball rolling and keep making sure that housing is staying at the forefront of our legislators' attention is incredibly important. Just because we had the Chip Infrastructure Act in the past doesn't mean that housing is done and it's solved. We still have a massive affordability issue and inventory issue here in Vermont that I think a lot of people are very sensitive to. So making sure that housing is staying at the forefront of our decision makers' attention is really, really important. I think we did that this session.
Yeah, I was really happy with some of the things that came out. And when, you're talking about affordability, so for you, not only being in the role CEO, but also a new person to Vermont, what's that experience like? Like how have you seen housing in Vermont versus some of the other places that you've been?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because just to give you some personal stats about this, in my neighborhood right now in South Burlington, you can't find a townhome for under 650, 700. That's over double what I sold my house for in Lexington that was 3,000 square feet. So right there, that's a huge sticker shock. I think there is a strong NIMBY mentality in a lot of areas, but we don't give enough credit to the Vermonters who want people to work, live, and play in the same area and
Yeah.
in one community. And I think that YIMBY culture, the yes in my backyard culture, is growing in Vermont. It's just making sure that the people who support the development of housing that's attainable for people, they have the microphone, they have the loudest voice throughout the state, I think is something that's really important that we're going to keep growing, working on.
And does that kind of like all tie into sort of what you see the roles of realtors are?
Absolutely. I mean, you're the defender of the American dream. I think that's
Trying.
one reason why
Can I put that on a t-shirt? I'm the defender of the American dream.
I
I
think
like
I
that.
think that it's so hard because we live in such a politically tumultuous culture and environment right now.
Slightly.
But it's the 250th anniversary of our founding, and I think that young people still want to achieve the American dream. They still want home ownership, and it still is something that is incredibly important to them. The studies and data will show that, and making sure that our members keep up the momentum and show people that they can achieve home ownership. It might be further out of reach than it was for their parents or the generations before that, but it's still achievable. And if we have members and consumers and legislators advocating for the development of attainable housing, we're going to get there.
Yeah, that's something that I didn't realize was quite the role of realtors when I got into the industry, which is you're spending a lot of time trying to keep homeowners or sellers or buyers their interest in the forefront,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, does this work for you? Are you like, if you're selling the home, are you doing it the correct way and that protects you? If you're buying the home, are you making sure that things are to the level that you need? You're doing a lot of, I don't want to say customer, but sort of client facing activity,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like the consumer is oftentimes your neighbor, it's your friend, it's somebody that you're trying to help. And, as a realtor, you really act as that bridge, trying to make sure that
Yeah.
it goes over well. And I see it more and more as just fundamental to quote unquote like what the American dream is
Mm-hmm.
being able to own something and have it. So it's an important role. And being able to do it inside of an association, I think has tremendous value. So that's one of the things that I'd kind of like you to explain a bit, which is explain the roles of associations both nationally and then on a state level and a local level, because not all
Yeah.
states have that. A lot of states are kind of moving away from that model.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're fortunate in the realtor organization to have what we call the three-way agreement. So we have the National Association of Realtors, 1.4 million members strong. Each state has their own association. We have about 2,000 realtor members, give or take, here in Vermont. And then within those states, there are local associations. We have 8 of those here in Vermont. I would just tell you from the state perspective, there is some uniformity. Every state should have a strong advocacy platform. Every state should be providing market statistics for their membership, whether it's from the MLS or if it's from their own proprietary data. We're fortunate to have both here in Vermont. And then you provide networking opportunities, you provide different levels of education and continuing education opportunities, professional development offerings. There's quite a bit that goes on through each state, but like we talked about, just the standardized forms here in Vermont, that's one big difference between what we have here and what we've had in other state associations that I've worked for. And then the National Association, the legal and risk management is a huge piece of it.
That was really prevalent during COVID, right?
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
National Association really had to step out in a big way and do a lot, and especially like in DC.
Absolutely, because advocacy is not just the legislative piece of it, it's the legal and risk mitigation piece of it. So settling the buyer side lawsuit was a big deal. I know that the previous seller side settlement just after the pandemic era was a big deal for our membership, and we had quite a few practice changes. But at the end of the day, that's what protects our membership for the future and also provides more transparency to the consumer.
And for people who consume real estate industry news, when somebody's not part of an association and they're not have that designation as a realtor, what does that mean?
I think it's your level of professionalism. In my opinion, I think that our realtor members should be in the same conversation as CPAs, honestly, with the education that you go through and the professional development that our members take on, and just the various requirements, not only to maintain your license, but to maintain your realtor membership. I think that's what sets our realtor members apart just from a realtor practitioner. And it's the code of ethics that they're bound to. So any consumer or member of the organization can file a complaint against a realtor that they believe violated the code of ethics. And I think it's that collective nature and environment that allows our members to hold each other accountable is something that I think is really profound about the realtor profession in our industry.
And if someone doesn't know exactly what you mean by the code of ethics, what do you mean? Is that coming from the state? Is that coming directly from NAR? Does it go down?
That's coming from the National Association of Realtors, so they can amend the code of ethics by a vote of the delegate body, which is essentially the local association president for every association in the country. It's very, very rare that that happens. But the code of ethics is just a uniform document and guidelines that our members live and abide by so that they are upholding professionalism and just providing the highest level of transparency and a duty of care to our consumers.
So that's another thing that is part of the association. So really, another way to put it would be, if somebody is a realtor as part of association, you as a consumer know that they are abiding by a certain code and that they have to have some sort of guidelines, guardrails, right? So that, to me, that's important. It's really important that people sort of understand that difference. And then, and this might be like a tricky question, but a lot of the stuff that's been in the news the past few years had to do with the settlement and the lawsuit. So how do you think that's kind of affected things, just more broadly?
I think it's encouraged our members and consumers to have more conversations together, especially when it comes to the compensation piece. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that the more transparent you're able to be with your clients and your consumers, the better. And I think that's something that is a direct result of the settlement, for better or for worse. So making sure that our members are holding each other accountable and that consumers are able to have those conversations is incredibly important.
So I have 2 points with that. So one, it was interesting after the lawsuit because I would have a lot of consumers come to me or come to my agents and they'd be like, so we're going to negotiate commissions, all that. And I'm like, they've always been negotiated.
Exactly.
Right? And they're
we
like,
didn't amplify that enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's something that was just like an unsaid piece of that conversation for a lot of people. So commissions always have been negotiable, but now we have to have that direct conversation with the consumer as realtor members.
Yeah. So I think that's actually been a positive, right? And I think Vermont was slightly ahead of the curve in other ways too. We always had buyer agreements in place and stuff like that before we did certain things. And I was actually shocked to hear that people were going full through transactions and didn't have agreements in place. I was like, where is that happening? And I think it was like places like California and all that.
A lot more places than you would think of, for sure.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. I was really quite surprised to hear that was the way other states were doing it. So it's one of those where sometimes Vermont is ahead, even though they say that things always come to Vermont last. So that line between sort of realtors, non-realtors. So then as you sort of sit leading the VAR and working behind the scenes to keep everything moving, what are the roles inside the VAR that are super important to keeping it flowing well? I know we have the president, Jennifer, she's fantastic, but there's a lot of other positions. So how would you break down and describe your team?
Yeah, so we have a strong relationship between our staff and our volunteer leadership. So the way our governance structure here works in Vermont, we have a board of directors of 19 members. Within that, we have the leadership team or the executive committee, which consists of the president, the vice president, the immediate past president, your treasurer, and then you have one executive committee appointee that is made by the president, and then myself. So we meet about every month, and then we meet directly before the board meetings as well, just to make sure that we are operating and firing on all cylinders, and now we're following the strategic plan and the business plan within that. So we also have a number of committees. We have an education committee, a government affairs committee, a member engagement committee. We have several that are able to assist our staff with the day-to-day operations and our initiatives as an association, and to provide the insight to see what our members really need out there in the field.
And the volunteer committee, right? How do, for realtors out there listening who are interested, how do they get a part of that? How does that work? Because 19 members in total plus your leadership executive portion. Mm-hmm. So how does that work? And it's pulled from various parts of the state, experience levels.
So each local association, we have 8 in Vermont, they get a certain amount of representatives on the board of directors based on their membership size. So reaching out to your local association to see if there's a director's seat available would be a great opportunity to do that.
I actually serve on the NVRA board of directors.
Yeah, so we'd love to see you move up to the state association board of directors. Other than that, our committees are a great opportunity to serve if you want to give back to the association and the industry. This is the first year we're actually going to launch committee applications, so you'll see that later this summer. And then the Leadership Academy is a great one too. Really hoping to make that an annual occurrence. Again, I love our inaugural class. You guys are such a strong group, such great camaraderie. I always joke with our members and our speakers that if I have 45 minutes budgeted for a presentation, I need an additional 45 for questions, because you guys are so inquisitive, and I love that. So that the Leadership Academy for the state is another great opportunity to get involved as well.
This is something I've seen also on just the local association level, is getting participation and engagement from, because we have 2,000 members, right? Was there difficulties with that in like the other states that you're working for? Do you see that as kind of like just in general the realtors, because they're all over the place, they're working, they're busy, you got independent contractors? How would you gauge kind of Vermont's participation?
I think member engagement is a tough ask for any association, to be honest with you. You see that across the country in every state and every locality. Increasing the number of members who want to volunteer and give back is really, really tough. But I think you have to show our members that it's worth the investment. I think that the networking opportunities and building that statewide network here in Vermont is why so many of our members get involved, and just building that referral network, being able to call somebody when you have an issue with a transaction or you have a question and you don't want to call someone within your brokerage or someone else in your community. Being able to get a diverse array of perspectives is something that I think a lot of our members who get involved at the volunteer level appreciate. So that's just one great aspect of being involved. But just showing people that it's not a sacrifice of your time, it's an investment, is the key to growing your member engagement.
What would be, because so I've seen that. We talk about that a lot on the local association level, which is having people come and be a part of it. Actually, recently, funny story with us, the NVRA had their annual burgers and beers at the John's Club, and I won the beer tower. So thank you for dropping that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that was one of those things where it was good to see members engaged. And I've noticed on the brokerage and agent level, you can usually see some of the best performing agents tend to be the ones you see most often. I think there is some sort of a correlation between being active, part of the associations, the committees, the meetings, the networking, that helps you as an agent just perform better. I always try to encourage, especially everybody on my team, get involved, right? Because if you're involved and you're hearing the conversations and you're in the room, it's going to give you more tools to give to clients and consumers. So I really see that. So hopefully we can keep up with member engagement and how many people are doing their part.
Absolutely. I think you guys had a great turnout at the Burgers and Beer event for NVRA. It was a pleasure to be there. Multiple of our local and state leadership were there as well. And I think part of what you're saying is just expanding your network is huge to a realtor's success. I think it's critical. And you have something to learn from everybody, no matter what their experience is. And I think part of the beauty of real estate and our realtor practitioners is that everybody has a different background. Very few people, unless you're a second or third generation realtor, got involved from an early age. So everybody has a different background. I know you do. I'd love to hear more about that. So I think everybody has something to learn from someone else. And especially when it comes to leadership, there's always tips and tricks and skills you can learn from someone else.
No, there is. So how long have you been connected to real estate?
I grew up in this industry, I like to
Okay.
say. So I'm 27 years old. When I was either 18 or 19, I started off just working at the front desk of the local association in Florida. I was just answering phones. I worked at a department store before that. Hated it, wasn't really cut out for that kind of sales work. And I just saw an ad to apply to be the receptionist part time. I was like, you know what? I'm in college. I can make this work with my schedule. And then about a year later, the association was looking for their first government affairs director. The CEO at the time approached me and knew that I was studying econ and poli-sci at the same time and asked if I would give it a shot. I was more than willing to do it. So by the time I was a junior in college at Stetson University, I was working full time, lobbying at city council, county commission meetings, having to miss class sometimes to go to Tallahassee and join the Florida Realtors cohort there for their Hill days. And then my senior year, I was the director of operations for the association.
And then you just kept moving up.
Yeah, absolutely. So at that time, I got to give a shout out to my former boss, Josh Summers. He was the CEO for a local association in Florida for a couple of years. And then when he got the CEO job in Kentucky, he brought me up there with him. So it was an incredible opportunity. It's tough moving further and further away from family, but having that initial partnership and relationship there and that mutual trust, I think helped us both succeed quite a bit.
And so your family's back in Florida.
Yeah. So I got family in Central Florida, Mount Dora area, just north of Orlando. And then my brother and my nephews all live in the Chicago area.
Okay. And so then you somehow ended up in Vermont.
I know, my mom's going to kill me. I keep moving further and further north. She's like, next thing you know, you're going to be in Canada.
I literally, basically, I live up in Canada. My family and I were up near the border. So I'm like,
I love being close to Montreal. It's great.
It is.
You just bop up there on the weekend and no problem whatsoever.
So you're back here. This is just a path that you've been on, which is sort of advocating for real estate on this level. Has there been any challenges sort of being younger in this industry and sort of like the amount of responsibility that's on your shoulders? I mean, because you handle it so well. And,
I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
and it's, I know it's not easy. And, I felt that, right? You're coming in and you're trying to shape things in a certain way. And I have learned, for better or worse, that realtors are some of the smartest, most driven people that I've met. And because it's a career field where people are coming from such diverse backgrounds, they're bringing all sorts of levels of experience. So it's difficult to know, like, if you're always doing the right thing. So do you feel, I mean, you must be really excited for what's coming up as you kind of close out your first year?
Yeah, I mean, it's been the opportunity of a lifetime. I have to say that. And I think definitely being on the younger side puts a chip on your shoulder because you are having to work with people that might be 2 or 3 times your age. And sometimes they have to take your direction and you have to lead them. But I think instilling confidence in people and just being vulnerable is a huge part of it, honestly. I think that's one of the most important traits that a leader can have. And I think that people are more willing to take your lead and to follow you and trust you as a leader if you are willing to be vulnerable. And one thing that I told the search committee when I came up here was that I think the most important leadership trait someone can have is empathy. I might wear my heart on my sleeves. I might be emotional sometimes, but nobody could ever say that Kyle doesn't care about me or Kyle doesn't care about this association. So I appreciate you saying that I handle some of those things well. But yeah, it's just been the opportunity of a lifetime, and growing up in this industry and being involved in leadership positions since I was literally a teenager, I think that it's allowed me to see how much our realtors care as well. No other profession volunteers more of their time than realtors. You guys are literally the heartbeat of your communities, and I believe in that, and I see what you guys do every day out there in the field to make dreams come true. And being a part of an association where we can just help you get to that next transaction and help your consumers more is why I do what I do and why so many other people in this position do the same.
You do a good job, and I mean that, right? And I didn't. You started at the same time that I'd started on one board and got picked up for the academy, and then also, I've been, general manager for fairly good sized real estate company here in Vermont for the better part of a year now, and it's sometimes you don't know all the answers, right? And I've been fortunate to have like good mentors like Jack Russell and all that stuff to really help me and take leadership cues from there. But one thing I've also seen is that leading and doing sometimes are two different things. And I always take my cues from those that have that 15, 20, 25-year experience in the field.
Yep.
But then also direction and vision and planning is a different thing.
Absolutely.
And if you have the mind for it, you just have to be confident and also accept the risks if it doesn't work. So I think you do that, and the empathy piece is something that I would say is your strength because it makes you very approachable.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And I like that you brought up your mentors and that leading and doing are two separate things. But in this position, I'm sure it's the same as yours. You have to show people that you're willing to do the work as well. I would never ask somebody to do something that I wouldn't do myself. And I think that a lot of other leaders that I've been around and have been fortunate enough to call mentors or friends or family, sometimes all three, have shown me that. Ron Phipps, who taught the Lead Vision course for the leadership class back in May, he's somebody that I look up to and I admire so much. And something that he's instilled in me is to make sure that your family gets the best of you, not what's left of you. And I think that's something that a lot of our members need to take back, because real estate is a 24/7 job. And as a direct result of that, so is the association. I can't tell you how many times that after hours I've been taking the dogs for a walk and someone calls my cell, like, hey, I can't get into my SentryLock account. What's going on?
Yeah.
I got to stop what I'm doing, put my phone in landscape mode and pull up their SentryLock account and see what's going on. So just making sure that you're available to be there for your people is really important.
Yeah, and I don't think that enough people understand the challenge of being a realtor. We often think of, or my perception has been, a lot of people sort of have this vision as realtors as a group as just flashy, say a lot, want a quick sale, and then it's done, and it's easy.
Yeah.
And I don't think what people realize is you are often interacting with people during some of the hardest or most important transitions of their lives, right? Like if you think of, to me, the big three, which is potentially upgrading from renting to owning or starting a new family or whatever gets you that first step to home ownership, right? That's a big transition, a big decision. Oftentimes you're dealing with family separations and divorce and the splitting of assets, and that's deeply emotional. And then oftentimes death, right? And so you have these like really big emotional triggers, and
It's a lot of baggage to carry.
it is. And as realtors, I tell people, or I tell new realtors, they're like, well, what should I study? And I'm like, study psychology.
Yeah.
Because it's all about people, right? Like real estate, my line is, well, it's not mine, I heard it from Jack, but real estate's easy, but people are hard. And, you're just constantly dealing with those relationships.
Something that our members don't sell themselves on enough is the human connection. In a world that is consolidating around us and becoming increasingly artificial, I think our members that emphasize their human connection will be in this for the longest time, because like you said, you're dealing with death, divorce, family separation. Being there for somebody while also helping facilitate the largest financial transaction of their lifetimes is what builds that lifelong relationship and connection.
It's super important. So I wanted to make sure I asked you this. So you and your team and the leadership team just came back from DC.
Yeah.
And there was some big momentum around this federal legislation that was going to hopefully improve, fix some of the bigger things to do with making home ownership easy. So you want to kind of talk about what that was and how it went, and then we'll talk about where it is in a second.
So we had 3 different key legislative priorities for Hill Day, and for those of our members in the audience that are realtor members or consumers, every year in May or June, it depends, NAR has their legislative meeting. So this year we had about 8,000 realtor members from across the country gather in Washington, D.C. We had 13 from Vermont, which is a really strong turnout from our state association. And we had Hill visits. So basically, we took one day, June 17th, and met with both senators and our representative from Vermont in their office. The House wasn't in session, so we met with their staff. But we had at least about an hour with Senator Welch and his team, which was an incredible opportunity just to advocate for home ownership. So a big part of that was the 21st Century Road to Housing Act, which has about 45 different components, I think too many to list and count in one podcast episode, that basically cut red tape and make it easier for housing development to get off the ground, and an array of other issues. And then fighting the home equity tax is another big one too that we're hoping to get across the finish line soon.
And so there was a huge push. I haven't checked the papers today, so I don't know on the current status of it, but I remember seeing the push and the initiative and to have something bipartisan come through and to make it all the way to that final place and not get signed. I just have to say I was so irritated.
I saw your video. Yeah. I was glad to see our members. Like, I love when you guys post things like that because it ties back to advocacy. And that's something that I think is so hard to quantify as a member value, because 411's great. The tech helpline is great. Those are tangible things that you can hold and feel that help you as a realtor. But advocacy is what makes this engine go. So seeing people like yourself that are leaders, not just in our association, but our community, tackle that and speak openly about it means a lot. So thank you for doing that.
I see it more and more that one of the biggest things that affects real estate the most is politics, right? And because we live in times that are often hyper political, right? And we're constantly divided over one side versus the other, the things that would benefit almost everybody, they get hijacked sometimes. And I just think I don't think it's the way that politics should actually be, right? And I do credit Vermont for this, right? I credit sort of our governor being able to manage both sides of the aisle. And I think some of the things legislatively should really be just clear decisions that it doesn't matter, right? It shouldn't matter if you have an R or a D in front of your name. You should be able to get those through because your people need them. So it's a dream that maybe one day on a national level we can get there, but that's maybe a whole separate podcast.
If you're not on the table, you're on the menu. That's just a great way to summarize.
I got to write that down.
That's not me. That's been around for decades. But yeah, if you're not on the table, you're on the menu. And that's why I encourage all of our members to advocate and to invest in the industry that we all care so much about.
Yeah. My saying for that is, because a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to get involved in politics. I'm like, and they're like, I don't want to play the games and stuff. I'm like, the game's even played.
Yeah.
So either you play it or it plays you.
Yeah.
Right. So,
I like
but
that.
I like your saying. That's pretty good.
They get to the same conclusions.
It just depends on how you word it. All right. So a couple things as we kind of wrap up. One, I had this up and I wanted to just make sure I hit on it. So you have a hidden talent in, is it filmmaking?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. So where is that? Can we expect some pretty awesome videos coming out of VARs?
I hope so. We need to budget for them. First of all, one thing that, just to dive back to previous experience, we did a lot of home buyer and seller testimonials in Kentucky, whether like if you've ever seen those Chick-fil-A commercials. I know we don't have Chick-fil-A here, but where the employee sits with a customer in the booth and has an honest conversation. We did a lot of those similar style videos. I love to do that in Vermont because we have so many members that go above and beyond for their clients, and to have that honest conversation, to tell that story is a big deal. Our members need to be telling their story. But yeah, so filmmaking, when I was at Stetson University, I took a class called Writing About Film. We watched 12 classics, had to write essays on them. And that kind of just inspired this passion for filmmaking and to just tell and create stories. So I met a good friend named Ivan that has an independent film company, still does it. He's working on his first feature film that'll be out later this year that I have a teeny, tiny, small part in. But I've had the privilege of directing several short films that have been in festivals.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to track some of those down.
Yeah.
I'm going to find them.
I'll send them to you.
Yeah.
The good ones.
And I guess the last thing I'll say is congratulations. I know you have a wedding coming up at some point this year.
Yeah, August 28th. Yeah, the love of my life. She's just my rock, and I'm so thankful that she was more than willing to move up here and to be a part of this journey. It's been incredible.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And the last thing is, what are some of the big events coming up for the end of the year that anybody should make sure they have on their calendar?
Yeah, so not sure when this will drop, but July 15th, we have our legal hoopla in Killington, Vermont. We'll have 3 different attorneys basically crafting a story of a transaction and all the places it can go wrong and how it gets passed off from attorney to attorney. So really looking forward to that event. And then our annual meeting will be here in Burlington, October 29th and 30th.
All right,
Yeah.
so mark your calendar.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Kyle, I'm really, really glad you could make it in today.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it, and we'll have to do this again next year.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.